Okay, joining me to discuss, I guess, Tuesday's elections is the one and only Joe Reynolds. Joe, welcome back.
It's great to be here, Jonathan, my friend. Thanks for having me on your special podcast or video cast or whatever we're calling it these days.
Yeah, I think its unofficial name is Let's Talk About Things, but so let's just do that. On Tuesday, Republicans had a great night, didn't they?
They did have a very good night, and I think it proves that you can run a candidate in a place like Virginia, a blue state, and you can run a candidate that's not Trump and win. But I think it doesn't prove so well for Trump because this guy Youngkin just got 10 more points than Trump got in the state, didn't he?
Yep. It was like about a 12.5 point swing, and I hate to be, the whole doomer here for Democrats, but if swings like that are replicated across the country, we Republicans only need like 5 seats to take the House. We could be talking like it's plausible Republicans could get at least 40 seats, and possible that they could get 50. And if anything like that happens, Republicans would actually get their strongest House majority, I think, since the 1920s.
Well, let's not put the cart before the horse here. There are still a lot of struggles that Republicans do have, and if this is a wake-up call for Democrats, and they can get organized, always a big question with Democrats. If they can get organized and can look critically at themselves and do a little bit of self-examination on why they're lost and how to win again, that might be helpful. You look at 2018 and they stuck to that one message: Republicans are going to take your health care away, pre-existing conditions. They want to get rid of them. It was a very strong message. People responded to it, and they voted for Democrats big in 2018. Democrats have lost their way on the message. I really don't understand the party, although I nominally support them only because I'm more of a former Republican, but I really don't understand the party because, it's something I call Dems law. No matter what beneficial position they're put in, they're going to find a way out of it because they're somewhat incompetent when it comes to messaging. They're incompetent when it comes to self-examination. I look at some of these Twitter feeds, and let me tell you, people live in a bubble, and you cannot. I was on a feed criticizing where I mildly criticized Kamala Harris. I said she's got some strengths and weaknesses. Here are weaknesses. She's a good prosecutor. She's not good on defense. And I went down this rabbit hole where people they were like, I was a sexist, I was a racist. And when you do that to people, it turns people away. And that's what Democrats are doing all the time, every day. They're turning people away. And they have no messaging, Jonathan. I don't know why they don't go and buy some ad time and go on Monday Night Football or prime time and just push their message across of what they've done or what they're doing or what they want to do. Nobody knows what the bill was in the bill. Nobody knows what's in the Build Back Better bill. And when people smell weakness, they could smell weakness with McAuliffe. They could smell weakness with the Democratic side, and people like to vote for the winner. And in the last week, you saw it all fall apart for McAuliffe. I picked McAuliffe to win. It was a error on my part. I will admit that I was wrong. But I heard something on one of the podcasts that was true. It was people talk to each other and they develop a permission structure to vote for the other guy and drop the Democrat and vote for the Republican. And that's what they did in Virginia. And if Democrats can get their act together, they might stem some of the losses. But you look at the redistricting, and it looks like the Republicans are going to gain a number of seats just there and be able to, without doing anything, they could sit on their hands and squeak out a victory just through redistricting. And if Democrats keep putting on blinders and saying nothing's wrong, then they're going to go get killed in 2022.
Yeah, no, I think I'm actually feeling a little bit more sorry, pessimistic about Democrats' chances next year than I think you are, just because if Virginia and not just Virginia but also New Jersey, if there is anything to go by, in New Jersey, Republicans made gains in the state legislature. Not only that, but the longtime state Senate president went down to defeat against a Republican truck driver who I believe spent $153 on his campaign in the form of donuts and probably a single advertisement shot on his phone. And people just said, enough. Like, I'm going to vote for the Republican. And in fact, Phil Murphy, the popular progressive governor of New Jersey, he's just going to win by well under 5 points. And it seems like, across the board, there are more examples that I can go by, but I can get into those in a second. But I think the swing is quite clear, and it's not in Democrats' favor.
It's definitely not in Democrats' favor. That voters, I thought, and I was wrong, I thought that Trump would still be a huge presence, and he is to me, because I see a big problem with Trump in 2024 and his continuing attack on democracy. However, voters aren't like me. They're not like you. They put these things in the past. They said, okay, we got rid of Trump. We did what we had to do. We're moving on. We're worried about our schools. We're worried about our other things in our lives. And it's a center-right country. It always has been. People will vote for Democrats, but you can't go crazy. And what people see is a lot of the defund the police killed them last time. Hopefully they're getting away from that. The CRT killed them this time. And there's a measure of truth in all these things, even though they're widely exaggerated by Fox News and other outlets. There's a kernel of truth in all of them that voters can see, that moms know about, that dads know about, that people on the Little League field talk about. And that kind of common knowledge, that conventional wisdom that gets passed around from person to person at the hockey games, at the ball fields, at the soccer games, that counts for a lot in the United States. That counts for a lot in democracy. And the Democrats just don't know how to do it. And it pains me. It really does.
But I also think that a bit of it was because, when people saw that there was record turnout, people just assumed that was going to benefit McAuliffe, and in the end, it benefited Youngkin. And I think that this kind of potentially blows the Bidikofer theory out of the water. Maybe there is an element of persuasion that's involved in these elections again.
Well, just let's look at the history. Presidents always get killed in the midterm. It happened to Trump. It happened to W in 2006. Maybe it didn't happen to him in 2002 only because of 9/11, but it happened to him in 2006, happened to Clinton in 94. These presidents lose seats. They lose their power. It erodes in the House or the Senate. And we're just looking at history repeat itself. So we got to go back to basics here and pretend that Trump doesn't exist and see the world for what it is, which is that the opposing party always picks up seats in the midterms, and that's going to happen here.
But you mentioned, the Democrats' inability to message effectively. One of the results that was one of the more striking was in Seattle, where Democrats nominated a literal prison and police abolitionist as their nominee. And in Seattle, I believe this is a place where Democrats outnumber Republicans 5-1, and a Republican won that race. Running as something of a moderate, and she won that race by double digits. And so if police abolition can't win in Seattle, then I have a feeling that there's plenty of other places where it can't win, and yet I somehow have this feeling that the squad is not going to realize this, and they are going to continue to push this message of that, we have to defund the police like Cori Bush did earlier this year, in the same breath where she said that she has private security protection. And I feel like that the squad is going to continue to be a non-cash contribution machine to the Republicans.
Absolutely, 100%. Now, you and I both have a lot of criticisms of the Republicans, like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Mo Brooks and Louis Gohmert and Paul Gosar, and there's a lot of clowns out there who do a lot of damage to democracy and talk a lot of nonsense. And it pains us to see these types of people in the houses of Congress, Madison Cawthorn, these types of people. But the thing is, the Republican voter base likes crazy. You can say whatever you want. You look at this Ohio race; they're racing to the bottom there with Josh Mandel and J.D. Vance. They're trying to scrape the bottom of the barrel, and there is no bottom. They keep going lower and lower and lower. And it doesn't matter to the Republican base. They're going to vote R anyway. But it does matter to Democrats, because Democrats have a lot of people who are going to examine them a lot more closely. Now, Republicans are going to forgive crazy all the livelong day, but Democrats aren't. You and I watched this closely. We saw what happened to the Labour Party in Britain. We saw what happened with what was the leader, Jeremy
Corbyn.
Jeremy Corbyn, and they thought that everybody wanted the most progressive, most crazy plans possible, and they thought that's what everybody wanted. Well, guess what? Nobody wants it. Nobody in America wants it. 10% of the Democratic Party have the loudest voices, people like AOC, people like Cori Bush, and these other voices. They're the ones that get picked up in Fox, and Fox is on it. Every dentist's office around the country, or most places you walk into, some diners, they got a Fox News on, and people hear these crazy things, and they don't forgive them. Now, when Republican voters hear crazy things from their people, they just push it aside, which doesn't seem fair, but who cares? It's politics. That's just the way it is. And Democrats don't understand this. They are going down the drain like the Labour Party in Britain. Now, the Labour Party now seems to be coming to their senses. They're kind of pushed away that progressive nutty wing, and they're hopefully coming to their senses. But it's going to take them a long time to rebuild. America's a center-right place. Britain's a center-right place. We'll vote for Democrats, but we don't want crazy.
Right, and I think it's useful to point out that because of Republicans' superior messaging ability, they know how to make people like Maria Salazar, down in Florida, or Young Kim in California. They know how to make those people the face of their own party, and or at least try to, rather than someone like, say, Josh Mandel or Mo Brooks. They're better at, I think, promoting the candidates that are going to bring them up rather than the ones that are going to bring them down, because of that superior messaging advantage that Republicans have over Democrats. Democrats similarly are not able to make, say, someone like Josh Gottheimer or Abigail Spanberger or Alyssa Slotkin the face of their party. Instead, they're being branded as the party of the squad, and I think that's going to have a big effect on how people perceive the parties.
In the Democratic Party, you can't make a mistake. In the Republican Party, you can try to overthrow the government and they'll forgive you. But Democrats, you can't make a mistake. If all we see is, profiling, and you just look at this gifted children thing in New York, it turns a lot of people away when you say everybody's, we're not going to have people join, the highest schools on merit anymore. You see all those Asian parents who have really worked hard to get their kids into these institutions, And now they're saying, no, we're going to give out fairly or unfairly. We're going to give out places to people who didn't get in on merit. Well, guess what? That turns people away, and they start to listen to, Republican voices who say, we're not going to do that. We're not going to profile based on race. You can't, the Democrats, they think that they can go down this hole and throw out any racist trope, and they're going to get votes, and they're going to find out that they're not.
And one thing that Democrats, I think, have to contend with, I think that, it depends on the exit poll you look at, but I think that the Associated Press and Fox News, their exit poll suggested that Glenn Youngkin outright won Latino voters in Virginia. And one thing that I think that Democrats have to contend with is that, when Republicans don't call Latinos, breeders or rapists and drug dealers, it turns out they're actually open to voting for them. And when Democrats counter message is, we need to, stand up for Latinx Americans. I think that Republicans, I think that Latinos realize, that doesn't speak to me, but what Republicans are saying does speak to me, because I think that Latinos, I think, are more conservative than Democrats give them credit for.
Yes, they are. And, every generation of the Latinos is growing into America now. It doesn't, they're, are 3 generations away. They've grown up as Americans, that their heritage is American now. So it's hard to say, this is a Latino and Latinos vote this way. Besides that, you and I both know that the Latino diaspora is very disparate. There are Latinos, Cuban Latinos in South Florida, and Puerto Ricans in New York, and there's Mexicans heritage in South Texas, and also Latinos who have lived here for 600 years. So there's all kinds of different Latinos, and they have different views. But all of them are parents, or a lot of them are parents, and their kids go to school. And when Republicans say the schools aren't being run right because they're being run with the CRT business and profiling, regardless of its truth or not, there's a kernel of truth in it, and it's enough for parents to say, that's right, I don't want that. Even Latin American parents or people with Latin American backgrounds, they think the same thing. I just want my child to get a good education. I don't want to, hear about, one race is better than the other, because the Latin Americans the Democrats are trying to appeal to them like they were once slaves, and most of them were never slaves. Democrats' messaging is all over the place. They're stepping on the rake, and they got to get their act together. Now, somebody like Joe Biden and people on his team, they ought to know what they need to do, but corralling some of this woke stuff, however, I don't see it, and most Americans don't see it, but what they do is they hear about it and they talk about it, and that's enough to turn voters away.
And let's talk about the fact that Biden, has not only aligned himself with the left, I think, on messaging, I think on policy. He's given the left, I think, a very important concession on the quote unquote human infrastructure bill, which is that it has to be yoked to the bipartisan bill, that both have to pass at the same time. And the fact that, that this is happening, I think that Biden didn't get elected on a mandate to radically change the country. His mandate was make the madness stop. And I think in some ways, Biden has not made the madness stop. I think there are aspects of the Biden presidency that I would even go as far as to say are quite Trumpian. Particularly his withdrawal from Afghanistan, but the fact that he's also listening to the left of his party on the spending bill, I think voters, are rightly, concerned. I know that about a few months ago, I soured on Biden after his pullout from Afghanistan, and given the choice right now, if there was a good Republican, in my district, I'd probably vote for them next year. But I just wondering if there's going to be a course correction, or if there's going to just continue down the same path, even at the expense of Congress.
Well, imagine if Abigail Spanberger had an R next to her name. she'd get reelected in a landslide. She would have no problem getting reelected. Instead, she is yoked to this, this progressive stuff that she has to explain away all the time. And as Ronald Reagan, I think, said, if you're explaining, you're losing in politics. And if you're explaining about defund the police, if you're explaining about CRT, if you're explaining about, racial profiling or trying to no longer accepting kids into gifted programs and different things about schools and education, and also the woke stuff that you get canceled. This is all almost urban legend, a lot of it, but some of it's true, and a kernel of truth is true, and people hear about it and they don't like it. Now, Abigail Spanberger and Alyssa Slotkin, people like that, who I adore. I love those national security Democrats. They're going to have a tough row to hoe to get through again, because I think even Spanberger's district is up for redistricting, and also Alyssa Slotkin only won by a little bit. Now, you just look to the Labor Party and what happened there with their progressive ideals, and that's what happened with the Democratic Party.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't have much reason for optimism. Is there anything that's happening that would give you reason to be hopeful that Democrats can turn this around?
Well, I see that, imagine that, the progressives didn't have any cards to play, and the infrastructure bill got passed without the promises of the BBB bill, the Build Back Better bill. So that huge social spending bill is still sitting in Joe Manchin's lap, and he's going.
And Democrats also have to contend with the debt ceiling in a few weeks.
Right. Well, I think that's a huge problem for Mitch McConnell if he wants to. I mean, he's on the winning side right now. If he was smart, I would just pass the debt ceiling. Let the Democrats, stumble all over themselves on the budget or social spending or any of these woke things, and just move on. If he's going to have another showdown with the debt ceiling, then I think that's going to hurt McConnell. It's going to hurt Republicans, and I bet he sees a better way ahead, and I think it'll pass, hopefully in December. Yeah, the one thing that I did see with Biden is that the progressives fell flat on their face, and the infrastructure bill was passed, and the Build Back Better bill wasn't. The social spending bill wasn't passed. Now it's waiting to be negotiated. We'll see how much they get out of it in the end. Maybe they get nothing. Maybe they get something. I don't know. But it just goes to show that the progressives don't have as much power as they think they do. The moderates do. People like Joe Manchin does hold the keys to the kingdom. And so if he can rein, if Joe Manchin with Biden can rein in the Democrats to get on message and talk more moderate and be more careful with our money, then maybe the Democrats do have a chance. But the Democrats have to go back to, they've lost the rural vote alarmingly, and they used to have union members, and they don't even have union members anymore. Even though people like Ted Cruz wants to get rid of unions, and Donald Trump hates unions and he's anti-union, union members don't vote for Democrats anymore because they see that Democrats have gotten away from that. Roll up your sleeves, go talk to the guys down on the shop floor, talk to the people on the street, talk to the guys who are moving the trucks, and they don't do that anymore. They seem too aloof, and people notice, voters notice. And David Axelrod said it the other day, even if you're going to lose by 70 points, it's better than losing by 90%, right? That little amount counts. So you got to go out there and you got to show your face in the rural areas. Now, some of this rural broadband stuff could be very good for them, in the infrastructure package, but they need to sell it, and they just don't know how to. all they know how to sell right now is that we're, every white person is guilty of something, and we better get out of the way.
Yeah, I was just looking at my Twitter feed and I saw a pretty startling statistic, which is that Trump carried rural Virginia by 6 points. So Biden only lost rural Virginia by 6 points. On Tuesday, Glenn Youngkin carried it by 27 points.
Yeah.
And a large portion of that was not just Democrats, continued collapse out west, but it's also like, more eastern areas that are more racially diverse, like in more African American predominant areas. Democrats just saw their margins go down there. And I think this has been a consistent problem I've noticed ever since Obama left office, which is that Democrats are not inspiring the turnout that they need with African Americans. That and I think that there also might be persuasion involved. I think there might be even a small number of African Americans who are saying, "Yeah, I think I'm culturally aligned with what the Republicans are saying."
And there's also a possibility that African Americans are fed up with the schools too. You think everybody is monolithic, but when it comes to kids in your schools, you want to have the best education possible. If you're black, you're white, or Hispanic, I really believe that of course, teaching the problems of slavery and the problems we've had in the past is fine and good to do, and we should talk about the mistakes the United States has made. But talking about how, as a white person, as a white child, and you're 10 years old and you don't know anything, you're being told that you have some guilt because you're a white 10-year-old. That makes separating kids by race like that, I think, as Youngkin said, it shouldn't happen. And hopefully the Democrats will learn a lesson from this. I don't know. They don't learn lessons very good, do they?
Right, and that was quite clear when they were, the whole line that I heard on election night was this was a win for white supremacy, and that this was a victory for racial politics, despite the fact that I think in something of an act of poetic justice, two Democratic statewide incumbents in Virginia who were entangled in a what's it called? A blackface conspiracy controversies just a few years ago. The among the people who were elected are a Cuban American who was elected Attorney General, Jason Myers, and Winsome Sears, who I believe is the first black woman ever elected statewide in Virginia history. This, to me, there's a bit of poetic justice involved that should send a message that the Democrats are unfortunately probably not going to receive.
Yeah. I think both of our biggest concern is Trump going to come back in 2024? And the writing on the wall is, yes, he is. And is he going to stage a coup after he wins and start purging the government of anybody who isn't sufficiently loyal to him? I think he will. And you and I see that as an incredible danger to democracy, and that we need to, really have the Democrats step up and understand that it is. But instead, they're worried about an infrastructure package, social spending. There's no base level electoral reform package that will prevent January 6th from happening again, because I think the Democrats, they just focus on spending money and giving away things like dental and eyeglasses, and they don't realize that we're in a very, very dangerous place with this guy Trump, and we need to figure out a way to keep him from becoming president again, and to also, block a few holes in this electoral college system that seems to depend. I mean, what if Mike Pence did say, what if he did say that that day on January 6th that President Trump is now declared winner? What would have happened? It was just one guy. I'm looking at it now. It was just one guy away from us our democracy falling apart. He did the right thing, but now
Yeah.
he's on the Trump train again. So we got to be vigilant. And when I see Democrats falling on their face all the time, I think, man, we're going to get hurt.
Yeah, well, if Mike Pence is back on the Trump train, he's probably a stowaway because Trump is not seeming to welcome him on the train at the moment.
Well, it's the same thing with Nikki Haley. You know, these people think, oh, Trump's going to go away, and he never goes away.
Yeah, but what you're saying about the whole, talk about the Electoral College, I just think that, to me, it really highlights that there's like two issues that, when it comes to elections that Republicans and Democrats talk about. Republicans talk about, voter impersonation fraud. Democrats talk about voter suppression. And in the grand scheme of things, I think neither of those two things are a big deal, because voter impersonation fraud is almost non-existent, and voter suppression has clearly not stopped people from actually voting. But what I think is a real concern that tops both these things by a country mile is election subversion. And
yeah.
I think there's a real opportunity for Republicans and Democrats in Congress to just put aside these petty differences over, voter suppression versus, voter fraud, and just come together and fix the process by which ballots are counted, by which elections are certified, and by which the electoral votes are counted. And I feel like we're squandering this opportunity because it's, even though it's by far the most important thing to fix, and Democrats are instead like pushing this wish list and making it easy for Republicans to attack the whole thing.
Yeah, it's a failure on the part of the Democrats to see the dangers ahead. I mean, we see the dangers ahead. Some of the Never Trumpers see the dangers ahead. Outlets like the Bulwark have been expounding on these kind of dangers, always being proven correct, time and time again. When the election was over back in last November, they said it's not over till it's over. Everybody poo-pooed us, and we were right. We've been vindicated every step of the way. This guy is never going to leave. He's spouting election lies all the time, and where are the Republicans standing up to him? They're nowhere. The few that did, they're slowly getting cut out, like Adam Kinzinger, some others. Liz Cheney might not survive a primary, especially to a person. They're going up Liz Cheney is going up in a primary against a woman who is outspokenly anti-Trump and now has flipped to being very pro-Trump. These are the kinds of people you can't trust. You can't trust when the chips are down. Now, Youngkin, I see he ran a good campaign. He seems like a moderate Mitt Romney kind of individual that's going to run
Larry Hogan.
That's going to run the state right, like a Larry Hogan, like a Charlie Baker in Massachusetts, and hopefully he does. But when it comes down to trust, I have a worry about trusting him with an election when he played footsie with the big lie and still plays footsie with it, because he needed those voters to vote for him, and that is the problem that Republicans have. As George Will said, they are terrified of their base. And if Trump says the election was stolen, and if 50% of the Republican Party says the election was stolen, then by God, if you're a Republican in Congress, you better not say that Joe Biden was elected legitimately, or you're going to be in trouble. You've seen Steve Scalise, he wouldn't answer Chris Wallace on air about whether the election was stolen or who was president. And this kind of behavior just reminds me of Vichy France, when there were people, little town mayors who just minded their own business, but then the Nazis came to town and they said, we want you to do this, we want you to do that, and they did it. And those trains rolled out. I know people say we shouldn't compare it to 30th Germany, but when I see the lack of trust I have in some of these Republican legislators, I see the very small-minded provincial mayors in a little town in France saying, here's the list of Jews in town. And I know that's Godwin's law. We shouldn't go down the road to saying everything is Hitler. But these are the kind of individuals we've been shown we can't trust. People like Lindsey Graham, like Nikki Haley, like Tim Scott, people in my state. You can't trust them when the chips are down. And I worry that the next time round, Trump's going to be successful.
Yeah, I'm hoping you're wrong. I'm hoping the fact that he's running not as an incumbent, much as he thinks otherwise, that he's the fact that maybe Kamala Harris will do the right thing. If Trump wins legitimately, that she certifies it as such, and if he loses, she certifies it as such as well. I don't think that. But I just, I'm worried that you're right, that we're going to see, not the Virginia model, or at least because the Republican Party in Virginia has been losing elections for about a decade, and all of a sudden now they decide, yeah, we're going to skip the primary.
Sorry to interrupt.
Nominate the right
model isn't replicable, as I heard on another podcast. That model, that primary model, the Virginia GOP said, we're going to make sure Youngkin gets through. If they had a genuine primary, they would have had a lot Trumpier candidate, and that candidate would have lost. Now, is that replicable in other primaries around the country? No, because most primaries are open to all candidates, and you look like a guy like Tim Rice in my state, who voted to impeach for impeachment in Trump's case. He's going to get primaried, and he may very well lose. So you look at these that Virginia, it's a very big success for Republicans, but can it be done elsewhere? And I think Republicans have a problem in their party that and Mitch McConnell does too, when he finds a guy like Herschel Walker and he says, I'm on board with Herschel Walker. This is a guy that's beaten women. He's tried to fire a revolver into his own head. He's abused women. And we have several other candidates like that. But it seems like all is forgiven. I don't know how much longer that kind of a party is sustainable. We have candidates that's also in Pennsylvania who, has a candidate has led his wife, and a candidate in Missouri, I think. So Missouri, one of the
Missouri, Eric Greitens.
Yeah, and we have these people who are. You remember Todd Aiken? He made a mistake by saying, if it's about rape, and he got drummed out by the female candidate there, senator. And now we have people doing the same thing, and Republican voters are saying, yeah, more of that. When Mitch McConnell says, I like Herschel Walker, there's something rotten in the party.
Yeah. I'm hoping, though, that possibly that Youngkin's victory could convince, some Republican primary voters that, hey, maybe we need to run more candidates like him, instead of the Paul Gosars and Andy Biggs's and Mo Brookses that are running. Maybe we need to.
The Republican primary based voters, they like the crazy, and they don't like guys like Youngkin. You think somebody's sensible, you put them up in a Republican primary, it's going to get slaughtered by somebody crazy. That's why J.D. Vance and Josh Mandel, you look at J.D. Vance, he's a smart, well-educated guy. And 2 years ago, if you listen to him talk, you think, this is the smartest guy in the room. Now he's trying to seem as dumb as possible, saying things as ridiculous as possible to try to out-crazy a guy like Josh Mandel. And that's the only way to success in the Republican Party now.
Yeah. Anyway, I was hoping we could end on a positive note, but
some of these other podcasts they end with a little, hey, what are you watching? What did you read this week? What podcast are you listening to? What are you listening to?
So what? I was listening to a bit of Charlie Sykes' interview with Adam Kinzinger. For those who are watching, I listened to The Bulwark. I listened to The Dispatch. Those two, I think, have kind of the sense of where I think a lot of Never Trump Republicans are, and I think I think the two combined, I think, represent a lot of what I believe. Not everything. Like I say, I'm my own man, but I do find that The Bulwark and The Dispatch, I never get disappointed when I listen to a podcast of theirs.
Yeah, I listen a lot to both of those as well. Another little podcast I listen to kind of Move aside politics is a little podcast called The Rest is History with two historians. They're British historians, but they'll take anything. They'll take a topic like the Old West or a topic like Stonehenge, and they'll do an hour on it. They'll do something on Thermopylae one day, and they'll do something with, Indian monuments another day, or California or Silicon Valley. It's very interesting, and it gets you away from politics a little bit. And I like to listen to little history stuff, and kind of gives you a big picture too, that maybe we aren't all doomed after all. I mean, there's been a lot of bad things that happened before, and maybe we'll get through this too.
Well, we can only hope. Joe, thank you so much for coming on. I know you've got a game in a bit, so I'll let you go for now.
All right. Go Pats.
Go Pats.